So I wanted to take a minute and tackle what I consider the casual problem, which is a massive stigma towards anyone that is deemed casual or any game that is deemed casual. There is a huge connotation with that word where basically if it's a casual game, then it's easy, it's trash, it's unskillful, and these players aren't even true gamers. And this is a very common perspective, and I want to talk about it and how I believe Diablo 4 is a more casual game, but that's actually not necessarily a bad thing, because just because a game can be casual doesn't mean that there isn't a ton of min-maxing going on, doesn't mean that there's a ton of really impressive skill demonstrations, and does not mean that there isn't something there for your more hardcore players such as myself. Now, before I define casuals and really dive into some of the comments that you all have made, the reason I make all these videos before Diablo 4 comes out is to talk with you all, engage in the community. And if you guys are interested in that type of content, be sure to subscribe. Only about 9% of you are subscribed. So if you're interested in Diablo 4 content before the game, and especially when the game comes out, I'll be absolutely blasting as I usually do, and you'll see a ton of content then. Now, the first thing I want to start off is defining what a casual player is. So defining casual here, I have a couple of articles, and these all kind of go in line with a lot of the more scientific studies that I've gone into, but we're not diving in super deep here. This is just a pretty basic search. This first article basically says that 30% of people play 8 to 12 hours of video games per week. That's the largest portion of respondents. Keep in mind that these are people that classify themselves as gamers. The largest share of Gen X typically splits between 8 and 12 hours and 1 to 3 hours per week. And boomers are mostly 1 to 3 hours per week. Again, these definitions are a little bit different. The second article basically says video gamers spend about 8 hours and 27 minutes each week. Again, another one here, this is based on country. Statistic here, 12 hours for China, 10 for Vietnam, and as we go to the Western, we have about 7-8 hours or so. And this last one, again, average gamers are spending about 7 hours and 7 minutes each week. So what's the problem with this type of classification? Why are these specific people being targeted, and why is the word casual being used as a derogatory term towards games and people in general? And a lot of people consider themselves casual players just because they enjoy games. But I want to cite a couple of comments here. For example, one of the comments a few days ago basically said, "Oh, it's a casual game. So sad what D2 has become. D4 is trash. Don't waste your time." And that is mainly because, again, it is classified as a casual game. On top of that, this other person basically mentions that, well, I also consider Vale to be more casual than the other content creators, so it's no wonder you agree with him. I find that I disagree with most of what he says, and his sentiments are why games are getting super casual to the point where they are just show up for a participation prize game. So this type of sentiment where it's like, oh, well, this game isn't any complicated mess or any sort of actual effort tied to it. It's a casual mess, and people who are casual, they are not intelligent. They don't know what they're talking about. They're typically just thrown by the wayside, and also the game is associated with this term, and therefore people throw away the game as well. And I want to kind of talk about this a little bit more, because I think this is actually a massive problem, because as we've just stated, the vast majority of people do not have a ton of time or do not want to spend a ton of time gaming. And so this is what the audience typically is appealing to, or rather the developers and the companies are appealing to. They're appealing to this audience, trying to make a game that has depth, but also doesn't necessarily need the depth to be a solid game. And that's what I really want to dive into, which is that casual doesn't necessarily have to matter in a sense. Now, it's no secret that I claim that Diablo 4 is a much more casual game. It is designed for the casual ARPG enjoyer. That is what I've stated in several different videos. And I would say that most people, I don't know of any person realistically that would say, oh yeah, D2 is actually more of a casual player's audience. Last Epoch is more casual. Path of Exile is more casual. The only one that I've seen potentially is Diablo 3, and I actually do agree Diablo 3 is also meant for a casual audience. Now, what does this mean in a sense of the game rather than the player? And also, does this truly matter? Well, first off, what it means is, it doesn't mean that the game doesn't have any depth. It just means that the systems in place encourage players to potentially spend only a small amount of time in the game and yet also get rewarded for it. They don't need to slug through many difficult pieces of content, or the systems have a baseline simplicity, sort of the idea of easy to start, difficult to master. This is the idea of a casual audience, right? Casual game. Diablo 3 is a perfect example of this. Maxroll has a ton of guides where they're min-maxing, putting builds together, and all that good stuff that actually do allow you to push higher and higher and higher. But the standard average Diablo 3 player could easily just equip a set of gear and then use those abilities and do completely fine, right? And blast their way through tons of greater rifts. It's really not that difficult. But that doesn't mean that people aren't sitting there min-maxing, trying to level as fast as possible, and doing all these things to get the most out of the game. The same thing applies for Diablo 3, right? In fact, I would argue that games that have a baseline difficulty, baseline meaning when you start the game, when you're leveling up, and when you're going through the initial skill process, it's very difficult to understand and has a large learning curve. I think that's actually necessarily a poor onboarding experience. I think games that generally have an appeal to a casual audience are actually constructed a little bit better, because you get an initial onboarding experience, it's easy to pick up, but then as you dive deeper and deeper into the systems, you end up in a situation where it actually has a lot of depth. And the perfect example of this is Diablo 4's Paragon system, right? The Paragon system has a very baseline, simplistic look. Oh, there are some stat nodes, there are some major nodes like legendary nodes and rare nodes that give me specific bonuses for specific skills. I just have to run those skills, pick up the bonuses that boost those skills, and I'm good to go. That's great. Yes, you can absolutely do that, and you could probably be super efficient there. However, you may be able to squeeze 10, 20% more damage, more effectiveness in combat, or even vastly more based on how you go about going through your tree and picking up side nodes that you may otherwise not have, or more importantly, picking up nodes around the glyph system, right, which focuses in on an area on the Paragon board. These systems are meant to be very simplistic on a surface level, but also have a ton of ability to change things up and min-max all of your stats, right? So when I say casual game, what I mean by that is a lot of the initial gameplay mechanics are easy to pick up. There isn't a whole lot of baseline difficulty, but that doesn't mean there isn't an end game, and there doesn't mean that this isn't some sort of really simple babies type game, which I think that is the whole connotation along with casual gaming, right? There is an end game in Diablo 4, and we've explicitly, and the developers have explicitly basically told us everything that we kind of need to know in regards to what we're going to be doing in the end game. We don't know how it's going to work in terms of what it actually will be like, but we know the concept in its entirety. And at the end of the day, that is the more experienced, less casual players, right? Most casual players will not necessarily engage a ton with the end game in any game, because they're looking to casually play the game for the purpose of potentially just enjoying their experience rather than min-maxing their character and working through the game. So I wanted to explain sort of what casual meant to me, as well as what an actual casual player is, and hear a lot of your feedback and basically try to dispute this stigma that casual games are simplistic, trash, and not worth playing, because I think that's usually a pretty bad sentiment. Thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all for the next one.